All right, welcome back, everyone. I have a special guest on. I got Ike Hobbs here, a fellow firefighter, and welcome to my channel, Ike.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you fill my audience in a little bit about your story, your journey, and what you're working on right now?
Okay. So yeah, like started probably, well, not sure how far back you want to go, but really on the investing side of real estate. Been at it for about 3 years now. Started looking in the Midwest, small town USA, a little bit of a different market than some of the big cities out there. And my first, I'm up to 7 units now, but just started with a house hack and did a lot of duplex rehab the inside. It's kind of a grandma's house, which is what I really like. You get the grandma's house, fix it up, make it look nice. And then I lived in a small unit on one side and rented out the other side and just kind of grown from there. So
So I,
right
you know,
now,
I always hear the fire service, the best job, best career out there. So why are you dabbling in real estate also?
yeah, so I do love the career. I started as a volunteer, working part time, um, worked for a small department, now at a bigger city department. I love the career. I like getting up and actually going to a job that's meaningful and has an impact on the community that I live in. But there's still, well, there's the free time in my schedule that I like. I can't be still. I gotta do something. And B, it's just like I still feel like in my life I've got a lot that I can do, and I don't want to just work 30 years to get a pension. I've got potential on other things that I want to fulfill. So, um, really, to be honest, like I'd be doing side jobs or anything, but I got interested in real estate. Um, Kind of had a couple of guys that I knew that were doing some stuff, and just looked at it as like, hey, this is something that I can do on my days off, but that will also continue to build. It's not, if I go mow lawns in the winter, that's slow. And also, as soon as I quit mowing lawns, the money stops flowing in. So for me, it's real estate's the avenue to be building towards my retirement, but also eventually take over my income and hopefully replace it. But we'll see how long that takes. So
I don't know if we're talking off camera also. And the funny thing is, I kind of asked you about your pension, and you really don't really know what your pension is set up as because, like you said, like you're not really looking at relying on that, right?
yeah, well, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, I'm in my 30s already, and I've only been at the department I'm at for about 2 years. So to make it, most guys in the department retire around 30 or 30 years on, and I'm like, I'm not doing this job at 60. Um, so that's one reason, but also the other reason is like I'm hoping as my portfolio grows, as the strategies that I'm looking at and implementing continue to kind of pay off. That at 35, right now the goal is 35, be able to replace my income, and it'd be a choice if I want to go into work. Now I like my job, so it might be something where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this for another 15, 20 years. But I want to be able to at least have the option and the freedom to be like, hey, it was great. I'm gonna go do real estate and then go do something else out in the national parks or something like that, because that's nature and getting out in the mountains and something I really enjoy doing. So
Yeah, or even if like you got an injury, right, where you don't have to kind of limp to the finish line and try to, like you're saying, you got to get a certain amount of years to collect your pension, right? So this,
yeah,
a lot of guys don't think of it that way, right? Like, what if they get hurt on the job? Like you're saying, if you have enough real estate to cover your living expenses, like you could just walk away in a sense and do something else, right?
yeah, yeah, and that I try to think positively. That's not something I usually consider much as like injuries and things like that, but it is a reality. And one of the reasons I'm doing firefighting is like I can't sit behind a desk and stay awake. So if I were to get hurt or injured and get stuck with a desk job, that would really suck. So, um, but no, it's like the avenues that I see real estate opening up with like the passive in quotation marks income, but also the other potential leverage it can use is like something that's really excited me and like have really grown for me. So
All right, so let's dig into your portfolio a little bit. And like you're saying, hopefully in what I believe you said 4 years, you're hoping your
Um,
portfolio covers your expenses, you said. So where are
yeah,
you
4 years.
at now? And then maybe what do you think, what do you hope the portfolio looks like in 4 years?
Yeah, so right now I'm at 7 units, and like we were talking on the show, I kind of dislike it when people get on. They're like, "Hey, I did this many units, this many years." Like, depending on the market, like it, one thing means something totally different in a different market. So where I'm at, cash flow is a big factor. Appreciation is not really a big factor. So at this point, I'm up to 7 units. Started, like I said, 2022 is when I finally bought one. First couple of days of 2022, and that was a duplex. House hacked that. Lived in one side, and then moved out once I'd been there about a year and a half. Um, when I moved out of it, I actually ended up renting a house because I needed to be closer to where I was working. And then there's a duplex across the street from my first duplex that went up for sale. Bought that, had to do a rehab, complete BA strategy on that. And we can talk about that later. That's been interesting. And then also bought a small family, single family house at that time. And then just in, let's see, what month is it? In May, closed on a house where I'm working at that has, it's a small bedroom or small house up front. And then there's a small ADU in the back. And I moved into that and doing another house hack with that. So really what I'm trying to do right now is leverage the cash that I have, which isn't a ton, but keep it moving, keep the velocity of that up really high because that's what I can do right now. And then eventually over time, probably go more appreciation plays, but right now it's all about cash flow. So
Yeah, so I kind of want to stay there real quick. So is this all been traditional financing? And like you mentioned, you're trying to turn over the cash as quickly as possible, and maybe you don't have a lot of cash. So I know you're a firefighter also, so I know you're not getting paid, you know, extremely crazy amounts unless you're working a lot of overtime. So is that something you're also doing
yeah,
to increase your income?
yeah. So I do where I'm working at now. We've actually don't have a ton of overtime, but I've got another department that I work for part time. I get some extra cash coming in. So that works out pretty well for me because the schedule there's pretty they're understaffed, so I can usually text and be like, "Hey, you want me to work tonight or work tomorrow?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, come on in," or they'll be like, "No, I've already got somebody." So it's kind of nice that I'm not locked in on the schedule with that. Sorry, what was the question again? I
No,
kind of
it's just of
lost.
that, and also like, so your purchases, were they all traditional financing?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first one in 2022 was FHA. And that was kind of interesting because I didn't want to go FHA because I didn't want to pay for the PMI. But I was also paying enough attention at the time that I was like, hey, rates are going up. And I got to get on this before it happens. So I did get locked in at a 3%, low threes. I think with the PMI added, it was like 3.6 is something what I calculated once. So, and looking back on it now, I'm like, hey, I'm really glad I took that step and locked it in instead of waiting for something else to happen. But so first one was FHA. The second one, BA, that one, I got a hard money loan, paid through the teeth and interest on that for 6 months. But then when I refinanced that, got conventional financing. And I didn't get cash out, but I didn't have to put any cash back into it. And then this one, well, the small house I got, that was actually a cash for deed deal that I've got going on. Small towns, people are a lot more willing to work with that as long as you can give them a little bit up front and also have a good name. So it was kind of one of those things where I had to be like, hey, I know, these 5 people that I figured that guy would know. Go talk to them. We worked out a pretty good deal with that. And then
And
the one I'm
firefighters have
moving
a good name though, right? Firefighters are very respected everywhere.
in the Midwest, they are pretty like it's something like I don't wear like the I like it as a job. It's not my personality. I'm not one of those that like walks around saying, "Hey, I'm a firefighter" to everybody. But it did definitely work in my favor on that one because like I was, there's a few people that I knew and he knew, and that helped. So And then the last one I just closed on in May, that was a conventional. I was trying to do just 5% down, and then last minute the lender changed some stuff on me, so I ended up putting about 9% down in the end. Um, but again, I'm trying to put as little into a deal as possible while still having quite a bit of equity and value add to it. So,
Well, before we dig into maybe some struggles that you might have encountered, I kind of want to focus on you taking action though. I think that's the biggest thing. Like you were saying, like you were noticing rates going up, you want to jump in, you did the PMI, but now you look back on it, you're like, oh shit, it's an amazing deal. But I think it's just a matter of taking action. And a lot of times people are waiting for that perfect moment or that perfect deal to come along. And it's like, you just got to get in there and realize that you can always change the financing at some point, or you can always change terms a little bit later, but you got to get the
yep.
property first, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I always try to, instill on people is you got to take action. You got to get that property first, and then you can kind of figure things out after that. But has
Yeah.
everything been pretty smooth after you got those properties?
To be honest, no. But at the same time, there's some things that like a year ago, before I did that bird deal, that if I had looked at some of the problems I was going to run into with that, I would have thought like, no way, that's going to sink me. Not something I want a part of. But when you're confronted with them and you got that hard money loan breathing down your neck and you just got to get through it, like you kind of overcome it and get through it. So it's funny you talk about taking action though, because part of my story, we didn't talk about this before, but I got started in real estate in 2015 as like a real estate agent. And I wanted to invest. I thought I would invest. And really, 2015 to about 2020, just kind of periods of just watching paralysis by analysis and like just kept being like, hey, the market's going to crash. This doesn't make sense. All these sorts of things and being like, this is something like I'll wait until it gets back into the 2008 crash prices and numbers and things like that because that's kind of how I was treating things. And then finally, there's a few things that happened in my life that just made me take some steps forward. But mostly for me, what I started doing was like looking at the economy and inflation and things like that, and being like, hey, if I really believe some of these things, then this is what the outcome is. And really, when I bought that first deal in 2022, it was on paper. I didn't think it was a great deal. I thought it was an okay deal. I was like, hey, I can live there. I won't be paying rent. So therefore, that'll pay off. If I get my renter in there at such and such a price, between these two numbers, I won't be out a lot of money every month. Um, but really, at that point, I was just like tired of not having anything, tired of not being able to say I took action, and definitely like realizing that, like, hey, I'm analyzing things way too much. Like, there's stuff I'm going to learn when I actually have something. And I'm not learning those lessons right now, sitting on the sidelines. So when I actually took that action, actually went ahead and got one. I was careful. It wasn't something that was going to sink me financially, but if it had worked out how I kind of projected, like it would have been only an okay deal. Now I'm fortunate; it ended up being a great deal. I rented it out for quite a bit more than I thought I would, as well as the rehab budget and some of those things actually came in quite a bit under what I thought I needed to be at. So that one paid off and enabled me to like have a lot more confidence and cash to go do the next one. But it's still one of those things that like, hey, if I just kept analyzing things on paper and waiting for things to get better, like I still wouldn't be in the game. Whereas now, just a couple years, 2.5 years later, I'm looking at like quite a bit different things and have the confidence to be like, all right, I can do this. Do I want to do it? Like, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of lessons I've learned and a lot of lessons I still got to learn. So
No, I think we're always learning, and I think even you follow like Michael Zuber, Dion, Lumberjack, they still talk about things that they're making mistakes with or things that they would have done differently, right? So it's always a constant evolution of what you're doing, and but I think the important thing to note on is that you took action and you kind of just figured it out, But that's also why like I'm very for investing in these smaller markets, right? It gives
Yeah.
you a little bit more um like you're saying, even if things were to blow up on you and go completely wrong, chances are it's not going to sink you completely, right? Whereas if you're trying to do $1 million flip in Hawaii, it's a lot of risk on the table, right? So
Yeah.
that's
The
why I'm
debt service
really
on that, like that would scare me. Whereas the debt service on what I'm doing right now, like it's kind of like, all right, if things go really bad, I'm gonna pick up a few more shifts. I'm gonna go wait tables, deliver pizza, something like that. Like I'll make it happen. Um, versus $1 million house in Hawaii. Like I don't know how people do that, but some people do it really successfully and good for them. So
Yeah, but a lot of them I know too, they started in smaller markets. They got their
yeah,
feet wet and now they're doing it here. But you also touched on a great point that about working overtime or having these opportunities. And that's why I'm always trying to get like the younger guys in the firehouse to take the risk now because
yeah,
you have this very secure job. You have these overtime opportunities to where if something does go wrong or you need some extra cash, you can pick up extra shifts, right? So I think that's another reason why I'm really trying to help the younger guys realize that do these things now while you have these opportunities.
yeah. And it's also kind of one of those things for the younger guys. Like when I bought this place in May, I was considering getting a big house and renting out the rooms. Ended up with this place with the ADU, and that I think I think next year, once I reach my 1 year that I've lived here, I could turn this into a medium term rental. It'll do really good then. So I went ahead and did this, but at the same time, I was looking at big houses and being like, "Hey, I'll live in the basement bedroom and rent out the others." Like, there's a lot of flexibility that I have right now that I can do. Um, not having kids, not having a lot of pets or something like that, and so just trying to leverage the things that I have to get me set up for the future. So, and then the other thing, like you were saying, like you got the ability to go out and do other jobs, work overtime. When I was in my early 20s, I worked for a general contractor. Yeah, that enabled me to have a lot of confidence now, like doing a lot of my own repairs, being able to evaluate a lot of my own things. On the flip side, what I'm starting to realize is like the more I do the repairs myself and all that, the less time I have. So it's that'll be probably the next couple levels that I gotta get through, like figuring out how to hire somebody. But at the same time, I know what good workmanship works looks like instead of having to be like, hey, is this done right, or is this going to cause problems in the future? Instead, I'm able to be like, hey, that issue's good, that's solved, things like that. So
Yeah, I love that. And even I'm sure you know Millennial Mike, but you know, I talk to other first responders, and a lot of times we kind of realize like maybe we're a different breed or maybe we see things differently. But I think we do well in real estate because we realize that sometimes you just got to figure it out. That, I'm sure you folks
yeah,
train and the training never goes exactly how the scenario plays out. And a lot of times you go to a
no,
scene and it's like, okay, we're here and we got to figure it out to the best of our ability. And that's kind of how real estate is a lot of times, I think.
yeah, and it's if you take it back to that job, like if you're there, you're it. Like it's no like, hey, this isn't what I expected. I'm gonna leave and come back later. It's not like, hey, I'm gonna call 911. You're like, when you're there, you're it. So yeah, I think sometimes with real estate, it's kind of like, hey, this is my problem to solve. Let's solve it versus being like, hey, I didn't expect to run into this issue. Now what? Instead, it's like, all right, let's figure it out. Let's work through it. So yeah, I think there's some similarities there. So
Yeah, so I love what you're doing, and I'm glad you always, pop in, to my lives and been following my channel. And you know, you did have a question in one of the lives that did come up, and you got
yeah,
upset that
now
I
I'm known as
called
that.
you. Yeah, I called you out on it, but your question was great, and I think that is something that a lot of people, do struggle with. If they are somewhat, they feel they're an introvert. Like, how do you network or how do you go to events? And I think this is a big step for you, right? Doing an interview or being on camera. So, is that something you struggle with though?
Yeah, trying to think how to couch it. So I do make myself get out, network, and like go to events. The place where I'm at right now, they've actually got quite a few monthly events going on by different groups. which is it's funny because like 2 years ago when I started like poking around for these groups, there wasn't much going on, and now there's something like at least once a week. But um, to me, it's like face to face. If we sit down and get coffee, I'm great. Like we can have a conversation. I'll ask questions. That's not the issue. It's when I enter a big crowd, that's where the introversion takes in. And like, I'm like, I just want to go stand in a corner, people watch, and then eventually be like, all right, I'm out. But you do that at so many events, and you start realizing, hey, I'm wasting a lot of time. Sometimes they have good speakers, and you learn something from that. But really, it's about meeting people, seeing what other people are doing, and what they're struggling with, and what they're learning, so that you can learn from that yourself without making the same mistake. So um, I'm kind of upset. I forget the acronym that guy gave you, uh, but it was a really good one, and everything I agreed with except for like the exit.
Was it
I think it was
pages or
like page.
page? It
I think it
was,
was
right?
page
Yeah.
because it ends with the exit, and I was like, yeah, that's where I really struggle because like I can get in there, I can start the small talk a little bit. I hate small talk, but like I can do a little bit of it, and then you start having the conversation, but then you get that one guy that like isn't doing anything but wants to tell you how to do it, and you're like, I want to go talk to somebody that has some units or is doing something, and like, how do you end that conversation and move on to the next? Or you get the guy that just wants to talk about anything besides real estate or what you're there for, and you're like, hey, it's good meeting you. Like, I'm down to talk again later, but I want to go meet a couple other people.
Ah,
Those are the things where I'm like, gotta learn, gotta get better at, gotta get smoother. But it is what it is. Like,
yeah. I never thought
those,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, because I've
Well,
been going to events for quite a while. There's always the stereotypes that you run into where you know the, the ones that drive me nuts are the guys that don't do anything, come to all the events, and then want to tell you about how to do it. It's like you'd be like, all right, how many have you done? And again, I'm not like, hey, I want to know that you've done more than me. It's more like I want to know that you're doing something. And I had that happen the other day with a guy, and he's like, oh well, I'm not doing anything right now, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go talk to somebody that is. So, but now I've met some good people here. Like one of the guys, he's working at HVAC, and like we show up at a lot of the same events, and he's kind of in the same. He started about the same time as I did, and like he's kind of taken a different tact. He's using a lot more hard money debt and things like that, which is interesting because now he's dealing with different stresses than I am. But at the same time, like his growth's been quite a bit bigger than what mine is. But we're learning from each other. Like I ended up using his hard money lender for my burr, and he's also kind of being like, all right, I'll tone down some of these things, so I'm not having to figure out how to service my debt every month. But you know,
see,
live and learn.
you gotta set up your own event, like a speed dating one. So that way there's no exit. You just everyone boom, 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 and is moving and talking to the next person. And that way there's no like awkward
There you
exit
go.
point, right? See, you can set up your own event
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, I'm talking with a couple of guys. We're probably gonna start like a cigars and real estate here
Ooh,
in the
yeah.
fall, and then just keep it really small. Is kind of what we're thinking, but
Ah, and then
we'll
you're
see
gonna
what
be in
happens with
Vegas,
that. So,
right?
possibly. So I haven't bought tickets yet. So I bought tickets to the last one, but then I was too busy working on a project and pretty much out of cash. So I was like, yeah, I probably better not go to Vegas. Uh,
Yeah.
I gotta finish this project and get it done with. So uh,
It happens. So it sounds like, you do follow kind of the one rental at a time community.
yeah.
So Zuber, Millennial Mike, Dion, Lumberjack. If you had to pick, like who do you kind of resonate with the most? Like your strategy or maybe your goal in your portfolio? Like who do you think you're kind of copying, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know that I follow the communities that well to say that. I think right now it's Dion because he kind of set it up to like put it there and forget it. Um, and that's kind of what I'm working for the next 4 years to get to a point where I'm like, hey, if I want to go take 6 months off, I can go do that. If I want to go do this for a year, like I can do that with minimal intervention. But at the same time, the super long term future is um, quite a bit bigger than that. And I don't want to just retire. I want to have a positive effect on a few other things in my life. So I don't trying to think how to say that. So at this point, I've got a lot more time ahead of me, and I'm excited to see where the future goes. So, but Dion's probably where I'm at. Of like, all right, I want to get my processes in place, so that's an option, and then we'll go from there. So,
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of people, that's kind of what they resonate with the most. It's just kind of that efficient and kind of hands off, and it's kind of running on its own, right? It's getting the most amount of cash flow with the least amount of doors. I think that's what a lot of people are
yeah,
attracted to. So yeah, I mean, you're doing cool stuff out there. I'm glad, we connected. I'm glad, you're able to hop in the lives, and we'll get you on a live one time. This was kind of the introduce you to the community and then
yeah,
get you
you had to
hopping
vet
on.
and see if the introvert talks. So,
No, yeah, yeah. Most people, they're fine. You just got to do the first one and then they're fine. Like get their cameras figured out and all those type of things. But
no, you're good.
I did want to also touch on, and I don't know if it's true. I think I saw it. I saw like a study or a report. But so your market in Kansas, is it, maybe I'm not saying it correctly, but does it not have a lot of inclement weather type of hazards? Like I saw from like an insurance thing, like there's not a lot of things like weather wise to be concerned with.
I don't. To be honest, I'm not familiar with something like that. We do have tornadoes, we get winds, things like
Hmm.
that. So, but we're not like subject to hurricanes. We got small earthquakes every once in a while, but so yeah, I could see something like that. But at the same time, we do kind of deal with extremes. Like I was telling you today, it's 100 degrees outside and humid, which makes working outside pretty rough. And then in the winter, we deal with multiple days. There's usually at least 1 week where it's like single digit temperatures or below zero temperatures.
Hmm.
So you kind of got to learn to make sure your units are prepped for the winter and actually aren't going to freeze over. And same in the summer, like the AC units are actually working because it's not one of those. If somebody's out of AC, it's kind of a big deal for them. So there's those things that we got to deal with. But yeah, as far as like catastrophic weather, I guess probably not a whole lot of that.
Man, I gotta look for that study again. But
Yeah, that'd
yeah,
be.
it was interesting that I saw that. But
My
yeah.
insurance is super cheap though, so I might need to get that study and send it to my agent. So
Well, now you have me interested in your market, like a small market where now I have connections there,
yeah,
boots on the ground, like you're saying, it cash flows very well. So yeah, I gotta start looking into.
yeah, it is kind of one of those things. Like, there's a few people in our area that like do the appreciation play, but really it's more of a cash flow market. Like, there's some appreciation, but not a ton. But like we were talking about earlier, like for me, when I moved from renting a place to buying a place, my monthly payment actually went down. It's still one of those things where it's cheaper to have a mortgage than it is to rent. So the fact that I'm living in a place where somebody else is paying 2/3 of the mortgage, like that works out pretty good for me. So
All right. So before we wrap things up, then, so maybe for any new investor or someone who hasn't even got started yet, they're looking for their first property. Like, what maybe advice could you give them?
um that's a good question. For me, it'd be like if you don't have the cash to do a minimal down payment on something, go work for somebody that's doing it. Um, Either a general contractor that's working on houses, like specifically, or go work for a real estate agent that's selling those types of houses, or go work for somebody that's doing property management, something like that. I contemplated going and just working for a property manager because I'm like, eventually someday that's what I want to know, those skills, what that looks like. Based on what they pay and the time commitment and all that, I don't think it was the best use of time. But at the same time, like you can learn a lot from that. So if you can't do anything, you can still get involved on the peripherals. You can go to the meetups. If you go to the meetups, be really careful of the guy that comes to you and says, "Yeah, join my coaching program." Uh, like I kind of mentioned earlier, like there's a decent amount of people out there that just want to use you for your money. and not let you do anything. But at the same time, there's always some solid people usually there that are doing stuff and they're happy to talk about it. That's one of the cool things about real estate, I think, is people can be super successful and completely willing to talk about it, how they did it, what they're doing, what's worked, what hasn't worked. It's not like there's a bunch of trade secrets. Everybody's like, hey, we want you to succeed too, because the more good real estate landlords, flippers, things out there are, the better off our industry is going to look. But if we keep slipping and letting the big companies like BlackRock and all that take it over, then eventually, that's going to be a pretty soulless society, in my opinion. But
No,
that's a different topic. So.
totally agree. And I'm glad you did this though, because I think there's a lot of people that, like you feel like you haven't done much. You feel like you're just getting started,
Yeah,
but your story is amazing, and your story is probably going to motivate a lot of people to do things. But even people that I know that just bought their first rental, they don't want to come on camera. They're like, I don't have anything to share. And I'm like, no, like people want to hear those things, right? People want to know that people
yeah.
took action and got their first property and how they did it, right? So I think those stories are more relatable than people talking about how they have 100 units with none of their own money or no money down and things, right? So I'm glad you did this, man. I'm
And
glad you
that's
really got on camera, man.
Yeah, like I said, that's one of the reasons I reached out to you. Was I was like, you've had a couple of guys with only a couple of units on, and they're not sitting there going like, I've done it. Here's how you do it. But they're like, hey, here's what worked for me. Here's what didn't work. And I'm like, that type of information is useful. As I'm working under a sink, repairing something or outside painting a house, something like that. Listening to those podcasts um, helps me feel like, hey, I'm not the only one doing this. I'm not the only one putting in the work. I'm not the only one making mistakes. Other people are doing stuff and messing up too, but we can all learn from each other. So I appreciate what you're doing and getting a wide variety of people on and a wide variety of topics. And I find it sometimes entertaining and sometimes very informational. And so I appreciate the work you're putting in.
Thanks, man. I'm glad people are watching though. I just try to have fun with it. So I'm glad you tune in and comment, and like I said, we'll get you on, and yeah, it's fun, man. So thanks for all the
Yeah.
support. And we connected on X, but if someone did want to reach out to you, get more information about you, or even know maybe about your market, like how can they connect with you?
Um, yeah, X is probably one of the better places. Just my name is the user handle. I use Instagram. I don't do a lot with real estate on Instagram yet, but there it's the Hobster on Instagram, and then Facebook, Ike Hobbs off of Facebook. So pretty easy to reach. But yeah, if you're in the area, Kansas, Wichita, Southern Kansas area, happy to connect, especially. But if somebody's elsewhere and they're like, hey, we're looking for a Midwest mid range market to invest in, like there's a lot of opportunity here. So
Yeah, and look out for your upcoming what real estate meetup, your cigar sit down, and yeah,
yeah,
so
if that takes off, I think sometime this fall. So
awesome, man. Yeah, so
we'll
so
we'll
thanks
figure
for
out a
doing
name
this.
for it.
Yeah, and we'll get you on some lives, and we'll have some more fun with that, man.
All right, man. I look forward to it.
All right, man. Thanks, man.